Thank you. Okay, welcome to the Programmes and Resources Committee for Friday, the 28th of April. Apologies for the slightly late start to this meeting. The previous meeting, the authority meeting, overran beyond the timetabled time we had. So thank you for staying. If we could start, please, with the roll call of members present, apologies for absence, and members' declarations of interest.
Thank you, Chair. Members, if you can just confirm your attendance and if you've got any declarations. Professor Haddock-Fraser.
Present and no declarations.
Mr Beresford.
Present and no declarations.
Councillor Farrell.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Greaves.
Present, no declarations.
Mr Hamid.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Heath.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor McCloy. Councillor McLaren.
Present, no declaration.
Ms Slack.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Tapping.
Present, no declarations.
Councillor Taylor. No. Ms Witter.
Present and declarations on item number 6.
Councillor Woods. We've also had apologies from Councillor Gregory and Councillor Finesse. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we could
Chairman,
move...
I'm also present, having been, as I'm allowed to be, as a chairman of another committee.
Thank you, Patrick. Item number 2, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 20th of January. Could we have a mover to accept those minutes, please? Thank you, James. Seconded by Charles. Thank you. Could we vote to accept those minutes, please? All in favour, thank you. Anyone who disagrees with that, and any abstentions? Thank you, that's unanimous approval of those. There's no urgent business, item number 3. There is no public participation today, and so I'd like to move to item number 5 for decision, which is the Landscape and Nature Recovery Aim Overview. The 2 items today are, and this is the first of the 2, are to review and accept the programmes for two elements of the National Park Management Plan, landscape and nature recovery, and the welcoming place one. So we'll do the second aim of the National Park Management Plan first, which is landscape and nature recovery. And I'm going to ask Sue Fletcher and Rodri Thomas to present a short presentation for this, and then we'll open it up to members' comments and questions. So, Sue and Rodri, over to you.
Hello members, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sue Fletcher and ably assisted by Rodri, of course. So, the purpose of the report is to inform members about the National Park Management Plan and Authority Plan, Landscape and Nature Recovery Aim. And also, just do a report, we can't cover everything, but a report on what we've been doing over the last year, since the last report in April 2022, touching on some of the key uncertainties and issues as well, and what this means for the future going forward. So just touching on the aim, the Peak District National Park is a resilient landscape in which nature, beauty and cultural heritage are significantly enhanced. And this would be really interesting to see how this works, because we've used far more links in the reports this time to try and make the shorter reports for you. But I thought it was just putting up, I'm not going to read them. The first objective 4, is about nature recovery and biodiversity. Objective 5, cultural heritage, and in particular, the built environment of the national park in this ever-changing landscape, which is a recurring theme. And objective 6, around the natural beauty, again, contrasting an ever-evolving landscape. So we thought it'd be good to give you just a little, hopefully, cheerful, some real successes, you know, and some good pictures, starting with the farming and protected landscapes. So year 2 has allocated and spent 1.2 million of the project fund, and is within, I think it's less than 0.5% out on its budget. So that's a great success of the team. now, and it's building on the £500,000 that was allocated and spent in the first year. So there are now over 213 projects delivering for the 4 themes of climate, nature, people and place, and the National Park Management Plan priorities. This first example is a 7-hectare site where wood pasture is being created on some private land, actually adjoins the authority's North Lees estate. Grassland restoration, species-rich grassland. The majority of the work has been around hay meadows. This is one example, variety of techniques used, and I think it's about 92 hectares that Whipple is now restored or enhanced. And that's part of the over 300 that the wider activities through the farm advice team have also been delivering. So I think that's quite an impressive figure. This is a really nice example. Phil's been here. This is under the People One, a nice little circular route just off the Tissington Trail, just down from the Minninglow lime kiln that was restored, that we took the Minister to, Andrew, as well. And it's really good. Got great crested newts. It's an old silica sand, so it brings in the cultural heritage, what we've got now, making the most of it. And it was lovely. The farmer here actually just put in X benches at his own cost for people to sit and have a rest and admire the view. This is a more recent one. This is the restoration of Allsop Moor lime kiln with volunteer support. I'm going to hand over to Rodri now. He's going to cover the work we've been doing on the One Nature Recovery Plan.
Thank you very much, Sue. So we've done work over the past year and are continuing work on developing a nature recovery plan for the Peak District. We've already produced a landscape strategy and wooded landscapes plan, which have been approved by members, and we're now working on this One Nature Recovery Plan for the place. We very much see it as a plan for the place, not a plan for the authority, in the same way as the National Park Management Plan, and we've been working closely with partners in trying to develop the plan. To date, we've had a number of workshops with partners. We have a steering group with partners. We have had a number of workshops with partners, with landowners and with land managers and farmers to try and take it forward and to develop the objectives behind nature recovery in the Peak District. And this we see as a blueprint for really looking at how we want to go with nature recovery in the Peak District over the next few years. This will contribute towards the Government's Environmental Improvement Plan. So this is the first revision of the 25-year Environment Plan, which came out in February 2023. And it will contribute to one of the 10 public goods, which are a focus of the Environmental Improvement Plan, of which the apex goal is thriving plants and wildlife. One of the projects that we've been involved in is a historic barn restoration pilot project, and this is the culmination of a project of 5 years' work that's been going on this. It's resulted in the restoration of 16 barns, restored at a cost of £2.7 million, of which 80% has been grant aided, 2.2 million. And as well as contributing to objectives around cultural heritage and landscape, this has also contributed to nature recovery as well, because a lot of these buildings now are being used by bats, barn owls, swallows, and that's been part of the sort of design and restoration process that's been embedded in that. So just one or two examples, just to put some sort of flavour on that. So here's an example from Knoll House, which is on the authority's Worslow Moors estate. Another example from One-Ash Grange at Munyash. This is a listed building, so there are things like listed building consent involved. Toosterwood Barn, Hassett, another example. Again, one that's been colonised by barn owls as well. Further example from Munyash at Kid Barn. So that gives you a bit of a flavour of the sort of things that pilot project has been achieving. And also yard barns as well as some of the field barns as well. An example from Balladon Moor here. One of the other projects that we've been involved in, actually a series of projects, has been around the undergrounding of overhead lines, and that has involved both high voltage lines, such as at Longdendale. Fortunately, we couldn't persuade the government to come up with the cash for the whole lot, but some important sections at Dunford Bridge, and this is one of the big pylons that have been dominating the skyline at Dunford Bridge for the past 60 years or so, in the process of coming down. And there's also been a number of projects around low voltage lines as well, which are delivered on sites such as Royston, some important historic sites as well, and landscape sites such as Royston Grange and Magpie Mine at Sheldon as well. Sue, thank you.
So I just wanted to touch on some of the uncertainties and issues, and not actually mentioned in the report, but National Park Management Plan format reviews. So that'll be really interesting to see how that comes back out of DEFRA. And future targets. So at the moment there are a series of deep dive workshops, I love that term, deep dive workshops with DEFRA looking at various of the outcomes that they're developing and the targets for all protected landscapes. Haven't really got any figures out of those yet, but they're working on it at the moment. Environmental land management schemes, ELMS, as we fondly call it. Really the issues here will largely be around, will the payments be enough to act as an incentive for the landscape and nature recovery that we want to see that's in our National Park Management Plan? Will there be incentives for things like wall retention, wall maintenance and restoration? Is it going to be too complex? They're striving to make it simple and easy to apply for and easy to deliver. That's still in progress. We've got some learnings to feed in from the Farming in Protected Landscapes programme, which is great. There's also an outstanding fear of penalties, which is a bit of a legacy from the previous European approach. So again, there are the things in place from DEFRA and the Royal Payments Agency to reduce that. And there is this need for a local convener, local delivery, local advice and guidance and local flexibility, so it can truly deliver for the local landscape. Just touching on local nature recovery strategies, which Rodri mentioned, this is where we need to make sure that our one nature recovery plan for the place works with and complements the 6 that we will have. The guidance that's referred to in one of the links does set out, not in great detail, there's more to come, but it does now say that national park authorities will be supporting bodies, if you like, to the county councils. The big one, another big one, huge one, I think this is the mainstay, the environmental and management schemes and the money, and that's what people are used to in terms of our farming and land management community. But there's so many new sources of private funding, and it's complex, it's a bit of a wild west, things are developing very quickly. The government sort of set out working with those at the British Standards Institution to come up with a framework to make sure that there's confidence building and that there isn't greenwashing. But it's a huge area for us and what our future role will be in that. So just going to the final slide, what this means, we will be delivering those delivery plan actions. We'll be leading some, partners in others. I think that's very clearly defined in the authorities plan now. VIPL has been really very successful nationally and locally for the Peak District, so it's been awarded extra funding and a 4th year through the Environmental Improvement Plan, which we mentioned earlier. So there will be a forthcoming paper to the full authority, because at the moment we have to have a temporary suspension of some standing orders to deliver the programme. So now into a 4th year we'll be coming back to full authority with that request once we have confirmation of the figures involved. There's also this emerging ELM national park test, which we will be looking at in terms of for all national park authorities, and that is looking at what our local convener and local delivery role might be, and very linked with private finances and how that might work and what mixed model there might be in these sort of landscapes. So I think the final point was we are going to see landscape change in the national park. We're setting our stall out to achieve that, and it's all part of that ever-evolving landscape. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Sue. And thank you, Rodri, for a whistle-stop tour through what is a complicated area. I remember when we were devising the management plan, this was an area where it was quite difficult to really nail down some targets because there's so much going on in terms of government policy, change, reviews. You've talked about deep dive reviews with DEFRA. They're still trying to find their way in terms of what they want from us before we can get many of the targets. So it's of many of the areas it's much more difficult to put defined targets on. Now there's an awful lot here, and thank you very much for a concise report. We're trying to get reports to be papers to be less long than they have been. But it doesn't mean that there's probably information that we haven't got in front of us in the report as members that might be useful to you. Some of it's in links, particularly to do with policies and things like that. But what I would like to do now is open it up to members for questions, comments, and have a sort of wide-ranging set of conversations about this. There are really two distinct areas. One is the work we've done to date, and the second is how we go forward in the future. And so I'm very happy we can take those views and comments all together from members. So, Pete, you've got your hand up, yes?
Yes, thank you, Janet. Great stuff. Thanks again. Well done on the FIPL stuff, because that's really going down well. I get feedback on that. And given that it's brilliantly good news, are we publicising it enough? I'm thinking that somebody earlier on was looking for good news to publicise. I think most of what you've said today is really good news, and that we can make a lot more of it in publicity terms. And certainly now we need good publicity. I had one suggestion is, can we have a bit more public? I know it's not in the report, but tree felling. People are always asking me, why have they chopped down all the trees? We need to be a bit more public about that, because we know that it's right and what's going on, but people see tree felling and ask questions about it. So something that maybe we could just be a bit more public, just let people know. And the other one was the barn restoration stuff is very good, and they all look very nice. But how far have we got with working out what we're going to do with restored barns? Because at the moment it seems that we are spending a lot of probably other people's money, admittedly, on some very expensive nesting boxes for barn owls.
And bats.
If I put it right. And bats, yeah. So I know it's an outstanding point, an outstanding question, but if you know anything, could you let us know?
Do you want to take the tree one?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, in relation to tree felling, I think that's a good point. We do get a lot of inquiries. Inevitably, it's an issue that people have concerns about. They don't understand with climate change and the biodiversity crisis, why people are felling trees. There obviously are circumstances where there are good reasons for that. I think it's something we perhaps deal with by a frequently asked questions section on our website, and we can look at perhaps developing that as something we could refer people to.
Okay, barns. Really good question. 16 barns isn't going to solve the problem of the condition for our fantastic heritage of field barns and indeed farmstead barns. Farmstead barns tend to go more towards alternative usage through the planning process. The field barns are more difficult because they have very limited alternative uses. However, the beauty of having been one of the 5 national parks delivering this restoration pilot is there are a number of learnings from that are being fed in. The process is quite complex. It has taken those full 5 years, in terms of expression of interest, and there's potentially quite a lot of fallout of people who are interested, because 20% is still a substantial cost for those farmers and land managers who own those barns. However, it's very interesting to also be doing some of this under the Farming and Protected Landscapes programme, where for the first time in a nationally funded scheme, we are exploring using restoring traditional repairs at 80% with other uses subject to planning permission. They'd only be considered once they had gone through the planning process. The ones we've had so far have been around educational use. So for the first time, it's sort of experimenting with combining traditional building restoration with alternative use for diversification for farmers. So those are all being fed into. We're hoping that what will come out as one of the strands in the new environmental land management scheme will be traditional restoration. And I think it is time to explore how that works with diversification in terms of that broader income. That's okay, Janet?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sue. Jill Heath.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm really pleased to hear you say about the diversification and the fact that you're willing to put some of your grant money in to help the farmers to diversify. And just make a point here that these barns, traditional and beautiful as they may be, they were built to be working barns. They were built for a purpose to help the farmers to do their livelihood. And, you know, to see them being diversified, education or the smaller ones or maybe the big ones more residential use, dare I say, to get them back into a good condition, it's only got to be a good thing. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jill. James Beresford.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I like the format of these reports, that they reflect the National Park Management Plan, and I think that's a really good way of bringing that to the attention of members. But self-evident in this particular paper is the approach to partnership work, which I think is exemplary. We can't do all of this alone, and I think, yes, of course, we have funding to enable us to do it, but the range of partners identified here is indicative of that which we're trying to achieve through the National Park Management Plan. So I really didn't want to say anything other than that. I clearly welcome the report and the achievements, and recognise the I'm trying to think of a word that doesn't sound like a swear word. The interventions that or complications that might be afforded us if we are set new targets through the new management planning process. But I think we can hold our heads up high in respect of how we're delivering this through partnership. And it means that it's true buy-in, and that's what we need to be achieving. So thank you and well done. And congratulations on your recent TV performance.
What? Thank you, James. Andrew.
So can you just clear up a little bit of confusion for me? Nature recovery strategies are led by county councils. So where does our Peak District Nature Recovery Plan sit? Above it, below it, to the side of it, in place of it? Because it was always going to be complicated for us with so many different county councils and constituent authorities. So what have we ended up with?
I'll try. And Roger will come in, I'm sure, but there was a period of time where National Parks England and the National Park authorities were trying to influence government that the local nature recovery strategies would be delivered, produced, and that the National Park authorities, because they were planning authorities, would do that, rather than, in our case, the constituent counties and unitary authorities. That really, we haven't got very far with that. So it is down the line that we will end up with 6. And that's why we actually then move forward. The Peak District is its own entity, economically, environmentally, culturally. So that's where we developed the idea in discussions with partners, and there was good partner buy-in. I think that's building. We're probably, still got some work to do on that, about developing one Peak District Nature Recovery Plan, which actually works with, and it is referred to in the delivery plan of the National Park Management Plan, that it needs to work with and complement the emerging local nature recovery strategies. And it's really interesting in this recent guidance announcement that I touched on, that we're technically being defined as supporting authorities. So not the responsible authority, but supporting. And there are, having due regard to, so there are certain phrases, how that's going to work out will be interesting. And it also appears that AONBs, when we look at this from a bigger protected landscape family approach, they're not included in that list of supporting authorities. So there's a big sort of pushback on that because they're not actually planning authorities. So long answer to the question, I think it's still very much a work in progress, but there is good buy-in. It has been a partnership effort. There's a way to go yet. There will be a launch event of the draft early in June, and then we'll take all the consultation responses. Rodri, do you want to add to that?
Thank you, Sue. So essentially, yes, it will sit alongside the statutory local nature recovery strategies. It won't be a statutory document in itself in the same way that the local nature recovery strategies will be. There are probably some advantages and disadvantages to that, and we've been liaising with the local authorities to make sure that the nature recovery plan for the Peak District complements and helps inform the statutory plans and vice versa.
Yes, of course.
Typical government just make it more complicated than it needs to be. Because I remember National Parks England, I spoke to the previous minister and said, we realised we're going to end up with 6 different strategies for the Peak District. They're going to duplicate each other, it's going to overlap, there's going to be confusion who does what, and the end result is we will not have one strong unified plan for the Peak District. We've ended up, it sounds like we're doing our own plan, which is great, but it won't have statutory power behind it. That will sit with all the counties. So we seem to be taking 2 steps forward and then a giant one back almost every time we go forward with this kind of thing. But let's make best use of what we can. And thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and you're rapidly turning into a grumpy old man, but thank you for your comments. Patrick, I've noticed you've got a question. I'd like to ask a question as chair first and then see if any of the other voting members have questions first. My question is, you've talked about elms, and there's a lot going on in terms of deep dives and trying to understand what's going on with DEFRA. Will the payments be enough? Fear of payments? Is it incentivising? Is it too complicated? This has been going on for quite a long time. Do we have any, and I think Jill might be interested to know the answer, do we have any idea when we're going to know the answers to those things and we can get on with it?
Where do I start? We're getting there. The basic level is the Sustainable Farming Incentive. That's been piloted. There are a number of standards that are out already, not of much use, and there certainly hasn't been much uptake in the national park so far, so not much particularly for uplands. They're beginning to emerge with one for moorland and one for low input grassland. They're working on one, for example, on the payment for maintenance of dry stone walls, which I think could be really useful in our landscape. And I think the target that the government refers to in the Environmental Improvement Plan is around 70% of the land area, farmers and land managers embracing more nature-friendly processes as their sort of headline, which I think is relating to the desired uptake for the Sustainable Farming Incentive at least. Obviously, in this national park and in the others, we're looking for far more. We're looking for very high uptake of the middle level, which was going to be the local nature recovery. That's now, in a way, following the little, should we say, unsteadiness government-wise last October. The direction of travel has been reaffirmed. However, they have taken a step back from creating a new local nature recovery scheme to continuing to develop and evolve the current countryside stewardship scheme. So that's the next one. So I think we're on with that, and there has been a big uplift in payments, both in terms of the annual payments for the land management options and for the capital works, which was badly needed at the start of the year. So that's good. There does need to be further improvements, and we're still very concerned in terms of the upland payments, and particularly where you look at the payments for somewhere like the White Peak Plateau of our White Peak area, where they're really not going to be enough, because that's quite productive land. And then the final element is the landscape recovery. And any time soon, there's going to be another launch of another pilot invitation to submit pilots. And I think the priorities are stated at the moment as being around protected landscapes, habitats. I think there's one on species as well. So we're waiting for the full information of that, but we are looking at, with partners, potentially 1 or 2 bids around landscape recovery. So it's beginning to happen, but there's still a lot of uncertainty, and it's an enormous amount of new stuff for farming and land managers to get to grips with. And that's where they need the support of organisations like us with the
Yeah.
partners.
And clarity in communicating what it really means to people.
Yeah.
Thank you. Patrick.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, can I just say how very helpful the FIPL team have been. I personally have applied for a grant, and my parish council has applied for a grant, and the parish council in particular have had absolutely brilliant service, incredible help, and I know we're all very, very grateful for it. Could I just add on to Peter's point now about publicity? I just have in mind that you apply for the smallest lottery grant and you have to put up a plaque on the side of the building and it's there for the next 50 years and all the rest of it. Is there not more possibilities of giving us a bit more kudos by encouraging little notices or signs and things to be put up whilst work is going on to say this is a project which is being funded by the National Park Authority? If we have to add through FIPL, fine. But there is the opportunity, I think, of getting us some sort of good press out of that one way or another. My question is on a totally different subject, really, which is the relationship between nature recovery and visitor numbers. There are certainly places that I know of where nature is very definitely trodden underfoot in relation to what is going on around it. And I'm wondering how far these strategies, as they develop, will start to try and address that issue.
Sue.
Shall I take the first one and Rodrigo the second?
Yeah.
Thank you, Patrick. First of all, with regard to publicity, there are a number of just temporary, just laminated signs that are used to do a little bit of explanation while work's going on. So I wouldn't say all the projects have that, but quite a number have that. Particularly the odder ones, like the restoration of a water tank for Yorgrave, when nobody really knows what it is. FIPL, I can't remember the amount. Over a certain amount of FIPL DEFRA funding on a project, there does have to be a formal FIPL plaque, not National Park Authority plaque. So there is something. And otherwise, the approach has been very much to not go down a lot of permanent signing because of the impact. Yeah, but there are increasingly numbers of interpretation projects coming in, and we're trying to explore that with the what's it called? I always forget the barcode thing.
QR code.
Thank you, QR code. In terms of actually having it at main source, but they're still in some of those are in progress at the moment. Audrey.
Thank you, Sue. Yes, in relation to visitors and nature recovery, there are clearly places where that's a bit of an issue and there are problems locally with that. I think there's a lot of work already ongoing to try and help resolve some of those issues. So there are examples such as footpath restoration up on the Snake, which has been shown to restrict people to narrow lines, and populations of birds have actually increased as a result of that. And at Stanage Management, working with the British Mountaineering Council on climbing, the impacts of climbing on sensitive species such as ring ouzels, and there's been a lot of good work done there which has helped safeguard the populations of ring ouzels alongside what is very heavily visited climbing site there. So there are ways of resolving some of these issues, I think, and some of that is already happening. It's also worth reflecting on the extent of those issues. So the at a UK level, there have been studies done in relation to the UK State of Nature report has looked at what the issues are behind the decline in biodiversity in this country. And it's interesting actually that disturbance and visitor pressure doesn't actually even feature in that. So clearly locally it is an issue, but I think there are some much bigger issues like climate change, like the direction of future land management, agriculture, things like that are bigger issues. Perhaps the biggest impact that visitors have is wildfires, moorland fires, and that's an issue that we're looking at with the moorland groups, working on how we address that at a strategic level.
Thank you, Rodri. Zahid.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Just following on from Patrick says, I'm interested in the connection between recovery and this priority for the park with planning, with the other core activities. So I was looking on page 13 on the 3 regulatory bullet points in the middle of the page. And I mean, I'm assuming that they're not just tick box exercises that have to be done. And I'd be interested to know what the developing authorities' approach for delivery of biodiversity net gain is, and what impact that will have in relation to both to nature recovery and, you know, statutory planning issues and developments, etc.
Sue, can you take that?
Yeah. It's definitely not a tick box.
No.
And it happens
It's
in
our
terms
core
of
purpose.
regulatory work at a various levels. So the first one is the work of the farm advice team that you have, and that is helping people, farmers and land managers, understand the current regulation. Again, there's a massive period of change with this because the basic payment scheme is disappearing. Along with it, at the end of the year, the cross-compliance requirements are disappearing. So DEFRA again is working. That's why they're looking at an incentive through the sustainable farming incentive for maintenance of wars, for example, and they're looking at possibly changing hedgerow regs. So there's a lot going on. So it's definitely not a tick box. We do the advice. We're doing the influencing work nationally with other national parks and with National Parks England. We do work very closely with the team at Natural England for the environmental impact assessment. That's part of Rodri's teamwork. Those cases are very time consuming when they come up. And we do have a variety of other legal processes and consultations. But I think probably it's worth Rodri just saying a little bit more about biodiversity net gain.
Thank you, Sue. So mandatory biodiversity net gain will come in November for certain types of development. We've been looking at how that might apply to the Peak District. And from some, we just started looking at that and reviewing that. I think there will probably be a very limited number of cases where the mandatory biodiversity net gain will apply to developments in the Peak District, but nevertheless they will be important. We're looking at, with the local plan, in discussion with other colleagues, about where we might take biodiversity net gain in a non-mandatory way. So, you know, other forms of development where actually we should be looking through to try and get some sort of biodiversity gain from that. And we've started discussions about that process and what that might look like. One of the other things that we are looking at is the possibility that development outside the national park might want to offset that by biodiversity net gain within the national park. Now, the guidance is generally that as far as possible, biodiversity net gain should be on site, but there will be cases where that's not possible. And a national investing in biodiversity in a national park may be quite an attractive proposition for developers if they've got to offset development and provide biodiversity net gain. So we're also looking at what opportunities might arise for that in the national park, and that's something we'll be looking at as part of the nature recovery plan and working with our colleagues in planning to explore that further.
Thank you. But that the biodiversity net gain as in a sort of offset capacity, that money wouldn't necessarily come to the authority, it would go to the landowner concerned, obviously. And it might also contradict any monies they're getting through an ELM scheme. Possibly.
I think that that's part of the work that's going on at the moment and continue to go on around the private funding and making sure that there is no double funding and how to blend those different sources together.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I think I'd like somebody to move the recommendations, if that's all right, Andrew, and Pete seconded. There's 2 recommendations. One is to note this report and the National Park Management Plan 2023 to 28 on this aim, and the other is to note that a report would be brought to the authority continuing suspension of temporary suspending of standing orders for a 4th year of FIPL. So I've had a mover and a seconder. All in favour, please. Anybody not in favour? Anybody abstaining? Thank you. Unanimous. Sue and Rodri, thank you very much. Really appreciate the fact that you know the details so we don't have to, because it's an incredibly complicated, fast-moving area that's vital to our purpose. So thank you very much. If we could have a change of team, please, and we'll move on to item number 6, which is welcoming place. Okay, Sarah, if I could ask you to lead on this item and introduce the other officers who are here as well, so that members know who's talking to us. Thank you. And we're going to have a short presentation on this area, similar format report to the first report this afternoon, and then I'll open it up to members for comments and questions. So over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Janet, and hello everybody. I've got with me several colleagues. I've got Sue Smith, that I think a lot of you know, who's led on the DEFRA access work. Will Ward, who's the project manager for the Champlain National Parks National Heritage Lottery Fund project that we're working with led by Mosaic. So it's nice to have Yvonne here as well. And at the back of the room, I've got Rachel Lyon, who's kind of led on that revision of the diverse audience plan as well. So she's here in case anyone has any questions around that. So I'm going to follow a very similar format to Sue. I'm going to introduce the kind of things that we've managed to deliver, some of those uncertainties and issues and where we're going to look forward to. And then we're going to have a quick presentation from Sue around the DEFRA Access Fund, and Will's going to talk a little bit more as the Champlain National Parks as some really shining examples of the work we've done around this welcoming place in the last 18 months nearly, I think, since we last came. I hope you appreciate the brevity of the paper, but do look at some of those links in there as well if you have time, because there's some further information in there. And I think that's one of the things to celebrate is the huge amount of delivery we've actually managed to do. In this period, we've still been coming out of COVID, and it has, this time last year, we were very much, for example, in groups that were coming out, the school visits that were coming out, was just beginning to build back up again to kind of proper levels that we were happy with, if you like. We've also finished off that Generation Green project that we brought to P&R last time and wrapped that up. Very successful project with our English National Parks and our partners, the YHA, try to remember the Scouts, Outward Bound. The other one, yeah, and still work going on there. There is another funding bid that's gone in by that coalition, and we're still waiting to hear about that. And they're still meeting, and they're still looking at further plans and further projects. So that's carrying on. We've delivered some health and wellbeing test and learn pilots, and we're moving forward and beginning to really find our way and what is unique about what we can offer that area of work in what is an incredibly complex kind of pattern. You talk about the complexity of the nature recovery plans, the NHS and all the health and wellbeing, public health, whatever they're now, because they keep changing. It's a really fluid place to be working and many different boundaries that we're crossing. But please do have a look at that Nature Prescriptions project, that there's a link in the report, because that is a really exciting project that we're doing with the RSPB just in High Peak at the moment. That will be really fascinating to see what the outcomes are from that. And obviously we've had the huge success in getting the money from DEFRA and spending it in the very short little window of opportunity we had for that access money as well. And a huge achievement that we've actually got our National Park Management Plan as well, and the Welcoming Place aim that brings together those different aspects around sustainable visitor engagement and management, sustainable business practices that supports that, and that equality of access that includes the health and wellbeing. So you've got in the paper that one aim and the 3 objectives that sit underneath it. And the other big success that we've had last year is that we've done a little restructure of our team. Seems like a very small precursor to what's now going to face the organisation. But we've reorganised the engagement and ranger team and brought in really key into that, the Access and Rights of Way team and the Peak Park Conservation Volunteer team as well. So we're really well placed to deliver what we've got in the National Park Management Plan going forward and our authority plan as well. We've tweaked roles, we've reorganised, and they really are set to kind of really be focused in their delivery. And with that is that revision of the diverse audience plan that really frames that for us. Uncertainties and issues. Like Sue, we've got DEFRA's still discussing what their management plan framework is going to look like and what our targets are. And I think they're really struggling with the people targets. That is another really complex and difficult one to give meaningful targets for. So we'll wait and see what the outcome of that is. Funding is always an issue. And obviously our ambition exceeds our capacity to deliver at the moment. And I do rely on funding. But the last year has also shown the success of working really closely with a foundation. And we've managed to get some small funding pots that enable us to deliver quite a lot. Special success around ambassador schools and how that seems to be a product and idea that appeals to funders to support as well. And with the foundation, we've managed to pull in quite a lot of money to help support that work. So, and next year we've already, thanks to the foundation, got some money to continue that work and also to support the health and wellbeing work that we do as well. The organisational change continues, and I think that's looks like it's going to have a big impact on the engagement service, seeing some significant changes in that, and that will be really difficult for our continued delivery of that welcoming aim that's going to be spread across many different places. But we have got that diverse audience plan as well that helps focus our authority work and bring it in. And then there's that hugely complex nature of health and wellbeing field and where it is, and navigating that successfully and really being clear about what our role is within that as well. Looking forward, we have got that diverse audience plan that helps bring it all together. The revision that Rachel's kind of led on has really brought in the access work, so that is really fed in. We've just, Pass for All have just released a really interesting piece of guidance around accessibility and access in the countryside, and in it highlighted the fact that there's a kind of chain of engagement, if you like, for access, and people on the whole focus on that third link in the chain, which is the infrastructure. And there's that what you need to do that make people make the decisions and inform them and give them the information around their visit first. And the diverse audience plan has kind of really helped pull all that together for us, and what that looks like for us as an authority as well. How we do those first two links with our communications, with the information we give before people actually come and visit. So it's our accessibility work now is broadening and linking different teams together. So huge thanks to Sue, who's kind of led on that as well. We have PPCV brought in with a really clear role on how it can support the delivery for a welcoming place as well. It's got a much clearer role in there. We've got the hugely successful, I hope, going forward, not only in developing but in delivery of Championing National Parks. That is a really innovative project working with Mosaic and 2 other national parks, North York Moors and Yorkshire Dales, that will give us a chance to pilot some really new ways of working. And we look like we're going to have a really different approach to how we support our visitors and how we get them the information they need to have a good, sustainable, positive visit as well. So lots to look forward to too. So I'm going to hand over to Sue, and let Sue do her bit.
Sue is there.
Thank you. Sorry.
DAFRA's Access 4 programme. It's a 3-year programme. In November, we received 131,000 funding from DEFRA for the removal of barriers to access to make protected landscapes, what is referred to in the Glover report as places for everyone. It is part of the government's environmental improvement plan. It is capital funding over this 3-year programme, so that is for the creation or acquisition of assets. And picking up on what Sarah was saying about giving people what they need, it's about building, it's providing the infrastructure, but also informing people and supporting people as well at every stage of their journey. Inclusivity is at the heart of the authority's work, and this funding has been used to create more miles, more places and more mobility so that everyone feels welcome. The full amount of the 131,000 has been spent in this 4-month period. The reporting outcomes, so we've heard before about the deep dive, so some of the reporting outcomes from this project is feeding into the deep dive work going on. So these are some of the things we've been looking at for accessibility. We've created 5.6 kilometres of accessible path through resurfacing, widening, ramping and installing or removing gates. Gap, of course, is always better than an accessible gate. We've been promoting miles without stiles, routes as being truly inclusive, and we've done that by a new video on our website. We've been developing an in-house system for route videos. So that's to provide the confidence, familiarity, and allow people to make their own assessment of whether the route's for them and whether it's worth it. We think they are, but allow people to judge for themselves. Mapping and guides for new sensory trails so that everyone slows down to connect with nature. New welcoming signage and symbols to provide at-a-glance information. An audit for Castleton as an accessible village and acquiring trampers, six of those, so that's tripled our fleet, an electric wheelchair, a trike, and providing 5 all-terrain wheelchairs which are free to borrow so no one feels excluded. And a few pictures now. So this is Surprise View, and I've just taken one site here to show the before, the during and the after. Now what we have is that the surprise is the view rather than the fact that it's not previously accessible for wheelchair users. So that's just above the Hope Valley, very, very short route, but packs a lot with the view. Crosses national and international habitats, so it required detailed design and needed to be sensitively carried out. And as you can see from there, it was our in-house team. Having in-house team working on these means that they can explain to people who are out and about why we're doing the work and how we're doing the work and what else we're planning and why it's important. In terms of more... Oops. You know you said not to press the button in the middle. I don't think I did. Oh, so sorry. Oh, okay. Sorry, bear with me. Yeah, can you pop it onto slideshow? From the current slide, maybe? Thank you. Sorry, everyone. Right. I've only got a couple more slides, so I'll be careful. Okay, so these are some of our more miles. So Long Causeway on the top left. The middle one is a little bit more of a surprise view, so that's taking you back to the car park, and then we've got Red Myers on the edge of Sheffield, so 3 little routes all in proximity to Sheffield. Below we have some work on the Tissington Trail, so we've got a bypass ramp to some steps, a wide step-free gate, and here near the Alsop Moor section we've been widening the trail. We've been looking at more places. So sometimes it can be really small things like a step. So what we've been looking at doing is developing, so we've taken that step out, we've ramped it up. It's one of our way bridges along the Tissington Trail, because what we're looking to do is provide covered shelters for people along the trail. We've been slowing down to connect with nature on our sensory trails. We've been providing a welcome, everyone's welcome, providing the information people need, both with symbols, but also through a sensory story for Castleton. And again, we've been looking at more mobility. So I'll just let you have a look at those photos. So bringing joy for everyone and celebrating beauty. Joy this side, beauty here. And so we're in year 2 now. What next? Thank you.
Thank you. How long do you need? Keep it short.
Thanks very much. It's good to speak to you this afternoon. My name is Will, as Sarah said, and I'm the Project Development Manager for Champion National Parks for Everyone. As Sarah mentioned, it is a project partnership that's led by Peak District Mosaic, but also involves 3 national parks, ourselves, the Yorkshire Dales and the North York Moors, as well as Derbyshire Dales CVS, providing governance support to Peak District Mosaic. Now, our vision is that the national park should be for everyone to visit, enjoy and help protect. Okay? Now, we know there are some barriers for some groups, so the National Lottery Heritage Fund have funded us specifically to support ethnically and culturally diverse communities to build a lifelong relationship with their national parks. So that's what we're about. Oh, I wasn't on the right slide, there we go. That was the one I meant to be on. So what we're doing at the moment is we're in the development phase, so we're actually funded by National Lottery Heritage Fund to have 9 months until July to work out our plans in far greater detail. We're doing a lot of public consultation at the moment, networking events, and actually our plans are actively changing and mutating as we go, and that's how it should be. We should be responding to what people say is needed. We're also working with Peak District Mosaic to do lots of capacity building, so their board of trustees has increased recently from 4 people to 11 people, bringing a whole range of skills into the organisation, working a lot on employment practices, particularly with Derbyshire Dales CVS, and also doing a very exciting business planning process, which is very much live at the moment and still being worked on. The idea is that we're going to be submitting an application to the National Lottery Heritage Fund in July. They'll be taking a few months to make a decision on that, and we expect a decision about whether we're going to be granted full project funding to come in December this year. If they do grant the funding, we would anticipate the project to begin April 2024 and last for about 2 years. So, what does the actual project look like if we are granted funding? Well, there'll be some new project roles. There'll be 2 new roles at Peak District Mosaic, the project manager, but also a development manager whose job it will be to work with the networks of community champions who lead visits for others in the national parks, but also help secure the kind of financial stability and sustainability of Peak District Mosaic as an independent charity into the future. There will be 3 project officer roles at the National Park, one of which will be at the Peak District National Park Authority. And we're also going to have a series of kind of early career opportunities. This is one of the bits we're kind of changing and getting a lot of feedback on the design of, but we're looking to have a range of sessional roles and a range of trainee roles which are actually going to be accessible for people from diverse communities to take a first step into the sector. We know from things such as the race report and we know things such as the countryside, the wildlife and countryside links roadmap for racial equity, that actually there's a lot of work to be done in the sector on this, so we want to do what we can through the project to contribute to that and provide really accessible opportunities that help diversify our workforce and hopefully diversify the work that we do and how well we do it in the long term. Second big area, National Park will be running activities, a series of outreach activities going out to nearby areas. We're particularly focusing on Sheffield and Manchester and Stockport because they're on the train lines and have good train links for us in the Peak District National Park, and doing a series of sessions in the national park, so people actually taking part in conservation volunteering activities, guided walks, but also learning about cultural heritage was actually one of the really key asks from the networking event, was actually learning about the culture and history and the arts of the Peak District, and people are very keen to learn about that as well. The real centrepiece of the project is the community champion training. This builds on previous projects such as Campaign for National Parks Mosaic model from previous years, and also the Peak Wise People training that the engagement team have run with Peak District Mosaic. And we'll be creating 24 community champions within the Peak District National Park. They'll be doing a detailed project to give them more confidence to be able to run visits for other people in the national parks. They'll also be given money and bursaries to cover equipment and training and transport to actually bring small groups of people in to run sustainable visits for their friends, families and other people in their communities within the national parks to explore, visit and enjoy the national park. And then finally an evaluation piece. So we'll be working with the University of Derby who will be conducting a full mixed methods evaluation on the project, and we'll be having a series of networking events to bring people together from the national parks and the wider sector to share, disseminate results, provide support and share best practice. And hopefully in 3 years' time we'll be able to stand here and say that it's hopefully been a successful project. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Is that the end of the presentations? Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Sue and Will and Sarah for the presentations. As with the previous item on landscape and nature recovery, this is a huge, complicated area, and it's very clear that the teams are making fantastic progress, particularly in a more complex environment, as it's increasingly recognised that the importance of nature and nature to people's health and well-being, and also learning about it through education. So fantastic progress in an increasingly complex landscape. And I'm going to open it up for comments and questions. I would actually, and Yvonne doesn't know this, but I'd actually like her to be as member champion for engagement and heavily involved in Mosaic. I just wonder if you'd like to make any comments or have any questions at the outset. Sorry to spring it on you.
I think I'm really pleased to know that we have managed to be able to be in a position as Peak District Mosaic to develop and to be able to take advice from DEFRA. So this started with Sarah making a suggestion, and then we contacted DEFRA, and the response was that we were on the list for them to contact us to do some work. There was some funding, what was the name of the funding again? But when we applied, Green Recovery Funding. So the first initial was to put in an expression of interest for that funding, and that's when the expression of interest was successful. And then we went on to the lottery program because it was too late for us to put in an application. So we've come a long way in doing what we need to do to be able to do work within national parks and with new audiences, and working in partnership with other national parks, not only Peak District National Park, and the good support that we've had since 2014 from Derbyshire Dale CVS. So I'm really pleased with where we've come, and for all the work that the staff are doing to work with us to make sure that this is something that we're doing to achieve some of the objectives of the national park in working with diverse communities and bringing new people into national park.
Thank you, Yvonne. If we could open up, I've got quite a few other members who've been sort of staring at me who want to ask questions. So Andrew first, please.
Really briefly, I'm really impressed by the breadth and the volume of work that's being delivered. If we think back just a few years to pandemic and lockdown, when just about everything seemed to stop, the fact that we've got so much going on and we're delivering so much despite all the resource issues that we're aware of, and so many success stories that resonate beyond this authority, beyond the Peak District, where we in the Peak District, with our partners, are seen as pioneers, which is really, really good to feel. Generation Green, accessibility work, Mosaic's leadership, and then nature prescriptions. People in government and other national parks are looking at us to see how we're setting the pace and how we're exploring things. And it is no surprise, Sue, with the accessibility funding that DEFRA were looking to the Peak District to leadership, and yours in particular. So, really proud at what our teams and our officers are delivering here. So, just a well done.
Thank you, Andrew. Charlotte Farrell.
I just wanted to thank Sue really for the Miles Without Styles, and just stress my husband is wheelchair dependent, so the first time we went up Long
Thank you, Charlotte. And James, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so impressed by all of this. It's absolutely fantastic. And two further observations. I mean, well, no, three. One, I think, we, as Andrew said, people look to us, but I'm not sure, for example, some of our senior stakeholders in the area, MPs and so on and so forth, know that we are doing this great work and we're groundbreaking. They're only too happy that there's an inclination to perhaps pile on us and say, well, we're doing things badly. But listen, this is exemplary and should certainly be held up as such. However, two other things. One, the nature of government funding is time limited. So, the fact that we've got this money, and hopefully we'll get more, inevitably the initiatives finish at the end of those. So, we have to set our minds around how we can make sure that this is embedded in the work of ourselves and of our partners in future. It isn't just funding led. That's a real challenge. And the other point I'd like to make is I'm impressed by the data research that's gone on, and I know the chair is equally fixated by data, as am I, but one of the things we're not perhaps getting from the data, and one of the things we perhaps need to instill in the really excellent audience diversification update plan, really superb, is the tone and the messages that we're using. We've got great points of engagement, great touch points, great initiatives, Mosaic being an exemplar in that respect of how we contact people. But what are we saying about this place? What does it mean to people who don't naturally feel this is a place they are comfortable with visiting? Never mind about inclined to visit. They are comfortable because at the moment it is clearly the playground of white middle class car owning public, and why should anybody feel comfortable by just coming here because we enjoy it? So I think there's something here about messaging and what's the tone of that messaging. How are we saying, well, actually this is an appropriate experience for you, and we should never be patting people on the head and saying, oh, do come and visit us, it's jolly good for you. And that's just dreadful. What does this place mean? What could it mean to folks this is not their natural area of comfort? So I think that's a challenge for us in terms of how, not just the way in which we communicate, but how we do and what we say within that communication. So, but it's brilliant.
Yep. Thank you, James. Do any of the officers want to comment on that? Yeah, go on then, give it a go.
I think you're absolutely right that tone is so important. But I think we've also learned that it's not just about us getting our tone right, it's us working with those communities to find out what it is they want from us. And it's not necessary that romp up kinder that we think is one of it. There are a lot of different ways people enjoy the national park, and we have to respond to that and make it possible for them to enjoy the park in those ways. I think we've moved a long way in our tone and voice over the last few years. We are much more aware of the images we put out and how we frame that. And I think we've done a lot of work with the comms team around that. Not saying we're there yet. We've obviously got a way to go. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think there's a long way we can go, James.
Yeah, Chair, would you indulge me? Can I just come back on that very briefly? I know,
okay.
Just very, 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 very
as
briefly.
Long as it's brief.
I mean, I am talking about the tone we use, but actually the greater challenge is the tone of the place and how other people communicate the place. We are but one voice, albeit a very energetic voice. But, some of the other partners and some of the partners we're not actually working with at the moment could well learn from some of the some of that, or respond to that challenge. But hey, well done.
Thanks,
I think there's some of that in our management plan, so let's see how we get on with it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. If we could move on now, please. Charles.
Thank you. It looks great, and there's clearly been a lot of engagement with community groups. How much discussion's been had with constituent authorities and elected members to see whether they can help identify audiences and community groups who might want to connect up with the park?
we try and do that, especially around the health. I think is the key area for us with our and trying to link in and understand where the different priorities are and how we can help work with those. It's really, that's one of our complex and challenging things. There's a lot of constituent authorities and a lot of groups, and we are a small, relatively small team, so it's very hard to do that. So we have tried to kind of focus in one or two areas, and that's where those health and wellbeing test and learn pilots have really helped us do that and develop those networks. But it's not an easy thing to do, so we have been a bit selective in who we're working with, and there's some clarity around that in the diverse audience plan. It's a piece of work we've been trying to do. I don't know if you wanted to add anything in there, Rachel.
Yeah, just to echo what you said, I think you know, we're trying to be quite thoughtful and strategic about where we put our time and energy, and then move, you know, hopefully move it on over time as we kind of build those networks. And you know, that we've done some really good work with Sheffield City Council recently, particularly, and officers with them, and working very closely with them, which has been really productive and on a number of different fronts, and I think we'll continue to do that. But yeah, we need to sort of grow some of that, and Sarah said there are, you know, we're a small team trying to do lots of interesting things, so yeah, it's great.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Charles. I'm not seeing any more questions being asked, so we have two recommendations here to note the theme on the management plan, and also to note the updated diverse audience plan. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Andrew. Seconder, Charles. Thank you. All in favour of these recommendations? Thank you. Anyone dissenting or disagreeing? No, thank you. Sarah and team, thank you ever so much. Another huge amount of work that's gone into this in an increasingly complicated area. So thank you very much for your time and your commitment to this. If we could move on to item number 7. Yes, we're still here. We've still got other items. It's just noting the minutes of the member climate change task group on the 12th of January. Noted them, and thank you very much. We do need to, as chair, I'm going to move that we move into exempt information, please, into part B of this meeting. Can I have a seconder for that, please? So if we could just